This is part one of a two-part interview with Dan Garvey. The interview was conducted on November 7th, 2008 in Vancouver, Washington. The first question was, what first attracted you to experiential education?
Experiential education was, it's interesting, you probably don't know this, but I actually discovered it. I was working with youth at risk at a residential treatment center, and I realized that when I brought the kids out into the woods, I had some sort of control over them. And I had absolutely no control. Despite the shock and horror of the other members of our staff, it worked, and it kept working, and I kept getting more and more praise from the other staff members. So
what worked? I mean, what turned them on?
What worked was that I was taking them into an environment that I felt very comfortable in, and they felt very uncomfortable, which was unlike the lockup facility. So when I was out there, they had to listen to me because their survival depended upon it. And I thought that all I needed to do was come back and write this up, and I would be able to retire at 23. And I came back and I realized that there was a whole industry out there of people that were doing this and were writing about it. And so that's what turned me on to experiential education, that it was hugely effective. It wasn't abstract, it was hugely effective. It's a very difficult group of kids.
Okay.
I can't think of like Steve, I can't think of a particular incident that that was, for me, the defining moment of experiential education. But I would say that I fell into it from two angles. One was the recreational part. Obviously, it allowed me to keep doing the things that I like to do. But more importantly, I had been involved probably since I was a sophomore in college, undergraduate, in trying to transform and do social activism. And I had identified education as being the institution that needed to change in order for us to progress. I looked at all of the institutions in our society, and I felt that if we could influence education, we had a chance of influencing the larger society. And I kind of cast about for years trying to figure out, well, that's great if you want to define yourself in terms of what you're opposed to, but I didn't have a positive thing that I could point to that was better than what I was critiquing until I bumped into experiential education. And then I realized that this whole set of philosophies and practices that we now lump as experiential education are the answer to the malaise that I saw in traditional education. And so, to me, the most exciting thing that I find is when a person uncovers that, falls into it, and experiences that epiphany that people learn best by doing. And it doesn't make any difference to me any longer whether that's through a wilderness situation or cross-cultural exposure or whatever it is. When they actually start to believe that this is the way that we're meant to learn, that to me is reinforcing. And being at Prescott College now, it's I see it every day because it's not simply wilderness education at Prescott College. It's
experiential education.
It's experiential education in every part of the curriculum. And so students are having that epiphany experience, whether they're doing the arts or they're doing history or they're doing political science or they're doing wilderness, adventure education. And to me, it's just affirmation of a sort of a philosophy or an intellectual curiosity that was well spent.
Yeah.
Over almost a lifetime now.
Yeah, and that's much the same journey that I went through.
I'm sure.
Well. Yeah.
I'm sure.
And a lot of people, I think. Yeah. Anything to add, Steve? You thought of a specific instance or not?
Lee, your comment about summer camp and those experiences was it reminded me of a story that I'll kind of talk about very quickly. It's a tragic story, but in 1996, I was involved with Semester at Sea, and we had this terrible bus accident in India, and I lost 5 students and a faculty member. They were killed in the bus accident, and it was hours, 8 hours between the time I was notified where I was in India and the time I was able to get to the scene of the accident. And by the time it was a bus accident, by the time I got there, students had to be dragged from the bus. There's no emergency response capability, so everyone was exactly where they were. But there was one student who, at the end of this, I found out was the most helpful. Some people were trapped in the bus and other people walked by and they couldn't help them because they were overwhelmed with their own sense of, grief or whatever. And there was this one kid who everyone talked about. And so when we got back on the ship, I made it my point to go and ask him, what happened? Was it your family? How is that you were able to act when no one else seemed to be able to get out of it? And he had a broken collarbone and he was dragging people out. And he was unspectacular in a lot of ways, and he had no idea, other than the fact that I was asking him, he had no idea what my background was. I was just an academic to him. And he said he had grown up going to summer camp, and he learned in summer camp that when things are bad, you have 2 options. You can either cry about them, or you can try to make them better. And he said, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to cry. Wow. And I thought to myself, oh my word, I mean, this is incredible. This series of experiences was transformational because some of the people that he was helping, they themselves, the survivors, still had broken backs, broken necks. They were badly, badly injured. And if it hadn't been for his intervention, there would have very, very likely been even more tragedy than we had. And I rarely remember that story. Honestly, I mean, it's one of those that's so locked into my, deep, deep memories. But when you were talking about the power of summer camp, it was just like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot about that incident.
As I mentioned to Lee, I've talked to lots of people over the years, and the number of people in the association now who started in summer camp is absolutely incredible.